Hi guys, I hope you had a good weekend. Cloud has been well, he's been annoying, but he's also been meowing a lot, so he will be back by popular demand. And I've got my candles here, and I'm all ready to read chapter 3. And like I said, it was called Miss Mackintosh, and we were thinking maybe that's her new teacher at her new school. After that night, I tried to stay awake, but exhaustion must have worn out because somehow I slept. When I woke the next morning, I was damp with dew. My neck ached, but I was grateful to be outside and surrounded by clean, fresh air. I sat up and stretched and looked over at the mattress. Marussia was sleeping, but Ivan was not there. Then Marussia opened her eyes and answered my unspoken question. He's gone to work. And I need to find a job too. What will I do? School doesn't start for 2 months, she replied. The lady who brought you crayons has offered to help you with your English. Since there wasn't a kitchen table, we balanced our breakfast plates of eggs, jam, and rye bread on our knees while sitting on the cinder block steps. We washed with hot water in the bathroom, then Marussia combed the tangles of my hair and re-wove it into 2 tight braids. Then she walked me 2 doors down the street to the house with the swings in the back. She knocked and we waited. The door opened. "Good morning, Nadia," said the woman in slow and careful English. "My name is Miss Mackintosh." "Good morning, Miss Mackintosh," I replied, speaking as carefully as I could in English. The woman turned to Marussia in surprisingly good Ukrainian and said, "Hello, Marussia. I hope you had a good first night in your new home." While the two chatted at the doorstep, I craned my neck to peek inside, but the curtains were drawn and the room was in shadow. A faint scent of lemons and something else wafted out of the house. Marussia mentioned that she would be looking for a job. "What did you do in Europe?" asked Miss Mackintosh. Marussia looked flustered. "You mean during the war?" "Before that," said Miss Mackintosh. "I was studying to be a pharmacist," said Marussia. "But I will take any kind of job here." "It will be difficult for you," said Miss Mackintosh in Ukrainian. "Nadia will be fine with me all day." What? I knew that Marussia would be looking for a job and that I was supposed to learn more English with this woman, but all day? I took Marussia's hand and looked at her pleadingly. "Nadia," said Marussia, "Ivan says that Miss Mackintosh has taught English to several children. You will be fine." And then, with determination that shook me, she pulled her hand from mine and stepped away. "Trust me, Nadia." Then she left. If I had been younger, I might have run after her, but I did not want to make a scene. I took a breath and swallowed my tears away. I lived through the war. I could suffer a day with Miss Mackintosh. Once my eyes had adjusted to the dimness of the living room, I could see that her floor was woven like ours, but it was mostly covered with a colorfully braided rag rug. The bits of floor that showed at the edges of the room had been varnished and waxed until they gleamed. Her living room was as tiny as ours, but I was amazed at how much furniture she had in it. Beside the door that led to the kitchen was a tall bookcase stuffed with books. Against the other wall was a fireplace with a photo-covered mantel. In the center was a silver-framed photograph of a sad-looking man in uniform. "Come and sit here," said Miss Mackintosh, placing her hand gently on my shoulder and leading me over to the sofa. I perched on the edge, and Miss Mackintosh drew a book from her shelf and sat down beside me. The cover was a painting of a girl with blonde braids just like mine. "This is the Picture Dictionary for Children," she said, pointing at each word on the cover, and she sounded it out. I love books more than anything. At the camp, there were sometimes books in the care packages, but not often ones for children. I longed to touch this one, to hold it up to my face and to smell it. But instead, I sat on the sofa beside Miss Mackintosh. She opened the book and marked the page. "Apple," said Miss Mackintosh, pointing to each letter as she pointed it out. "Apple," I said. She flipped it over to a marked page, a drawing of a car, automobile. She said, grinning, almost the same word in English as in Ukrainian. Okay, I know you want to see my cat, so I'll go get my cat quick. Okay, so we're about 5 minutes in. Here is Cloud. Hi. He looks like he's smiling sometimes. He's so happy. I feed him wet food and dry food, and he just has the best life. Okay. I also got some tulips, and I'm waiting for them to open. They're brand new. I got them over the weekend. Oh, Cloud's interested in them. Okay, bye-bye, Cloud. And yeah, I might bring them to school for you guys to see and to water, and it would be really cool for us to see them bloom together. Okay. Bye-bye. We practiced half a dozen words and then she flipped back to Apple again and we reviewed them all. She did a few new ones and she started back at the beginning for another review. I knew I wasn't really learning to speak English. I was just learning the English labels for things, but it was fun doing it with the pictures. When Miss McIntosh thought that I had learned those words well enough, we went to the next 6 and then the next 6 after that. I had no idea how long we sat there, but it was likely hours because my bottom was getting numb. I flipped ahead and I started by the image of a ferocious looking Pez. I took a deep breath and I pointed at the letters underneath the picture. Dog, I said. Very good, said Miss McIntosh, but I think she could tell that the picture had scared me. Time for a break, she said as she stood up from the sofa. In Ukrainian, she asked, would you like something to eat? Yes, please, I answered in my best English, getting up from the sofa and stretching. I had no idea how long we had been sitting there. Time seemed to have flashed by. As Miss McIntosh busied herself in the kitchen, I picked up a silver frame photograph off the mantel. The uniformed man was young. His uniform was dark and he wore a cap perched at an angle over his right eye. Another mantle, another uniform. This one also dark. An image fitted just beyond my grasp. An image flighted just beyond my grasp as I put the photo back in its place and turned to the bookcase. Miss McIntosh books had colorful spines and the titles were all in English. I longed to pull one out to look at it, but didn't want to do that without permission, so I stepped just inside the kitchen and watched her. You can sit there, she said, pointing to one of the kitchen chairs. She set 2 glasses of milk on the table, 2 empty soup bowls, 2 empty plates. She opened the cupboard and took out a red and white can and opened it. She slid the jiggly contents into a saucepan and added a can of water. Miss McIntosh didn't have an icebox like we did, she had a refrigerator. She opened it and took out an orange block of something. A bit of the cool air escaped and enveloped my face. Miss McIntosh sliced some of the orange block and arranged it into squares of slices. Of Wonder Bread, I thought. But I thought I had seen the last of Wonder Bread, but it was not to be. Please, what is that? I asked in English, pointing to the block of orange. Velveeta, answered Miss McIntosh. Velveeta, I repeated. It's a kind of cheese, said Miss McIntosh in Ukrainian. Oh! She set the slices of Wonder Bread on a cookie sheet with the pieces of Velveeta on top and slid the sheet into the oven. Steam rose from the soup. It's ready, she said. She pulled out the cookie sheet and brought it over to the table, then slid an open-faced cheese sandwich onto each of our plates. I watched my bowl fill with red as she ladled out the soup for each of us. The soup was like nothing I'd ever seen. Soup was a staple in the camp. Usually it was mostly water with some cabbage and potato, but every once in a while there would be a bit of meat. This soup was thick like gravy. I took a small spoonful and placed it on my tongue. A tangy, sweet tomato taste. Not bad, but not really soup either. I smiled at Miss McIntosh. Good, I said. She nodded in approval. The sandwich was another matter. She had never seen cheese quite that color before, and the fact that it was on Wonder Bread didn't help. I picked up the sandwich with my fingertips and took a small bite. The bread was toasty from the oven and the cheese had a pleasant, gooey texture. Miss McIntosh was watching me expectantly. I swallowed, grateful as always for any food. Mercy and I are sprawled on an open, flat car in the blackest part of the night. Other escapees too, all holding on as the train chugs along at an alarming speed. It slows to a stop. I sit up and watch in horror as Marussia jumps off and runs into a farmer's field. She is scrabbling in the dry earth, digging with bare hands. I hear her hoot for joy. She runs back and jumps onto the flat car. Potatoes, she says, 2 of them. One of the other fugitives brings a pot out of a tattered bag, and someone makes a small fire from gathering twigs in the middle of the flat car. Another man who has run into the field comes back with his hat filled with muddy water. He dumps it into the pot. Marussia adds her potatoes. The steam of the cooking potatoes makes my stomach grumble. I've had nothing to eat for days. This is the first time the train has stopped since we've taken refuge on the flat car. The potatoes are barely cooked enough, but we cannot wait. We have no idea how long the train will remain still, and we're afraid the smell of fire will bring soldiers. One man has a spoon tucked away in a frayed coat. He takes it out and dips it into our soup and gives it to me, the only child, the first spoon. It is the best soup I've ever tasted. The spoon is passed around like a sacrament. Within minutes, every drop is consumed. The train starts moving just as we're finishing. I felt a hand on my shoulder as I startled back into the present. Miss McIntosh looked at me with concern. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I rubbed them from my face with the back of my hand and avoided Miss McIntosh's stare. The random images made me look confused and angry with myself. Miss McIntosh finished her soup and sandwich, and then I stacked the dirty dishes and cutlery and began to carry them into the sink. "You shouldn't have to do that," said Miss McIntosh, taking the dishes from my hand. "But I would like to help you," I said, knowing that Marussia would expect nothing less. And the busy work helped me shake the memory. I stood beside Miss McIntosh as she filled the sink with hot sudsy water. "Okay," she said, handing me a dish towel. "You can dry." I took each plate as she placed it on the rack and dried it carefully, admiring the delicate pattern of matching pink roses, and I placed them into her cupboard. The pieces were smooth and light to the touch. Not at all like the mismatched cups and the plates that Ivan had found for us. Miss McIntosh drained the water from the sink and wiped the counter dry. "There," she said, "all done. I think it's time for a treat." She set out some small brown cookies on a plate. "Ginger snaps," she said, motioning to me to sit back at the table. "Ginger snaps," I repeated. It was a nice word, but it didn't exactly roll off my tongue. They looked like honey cookies. I picked one up and sniffed it. They did not smell like honey. They smelled like another scent that I had noticed when I first arrived at Miss McIntosh's house. I took a tiny bite. The cookie was crispy like a honey cookie, but it was a taste like biting into a memory. The blonde woman has her servant make cookies with a sweet yet peppery taste. And they are shaped like men, gingerbread men. I bit off the head and swallowed it down, and then an arm and a leg. The ginger snap was a dry lump in the back of my throat. I looked up. Miss McIntosh was watching me intently again. I tried to swallow, but nearly choked. I gulped down some milk, and the cookie slid down my throat. "Good," I said weakly. Miss McIntosh smiled. There was a tapping at the kitchen door. Had Marussia given up on her job search and come to get me? Miss McIntosh opened the door. It wasn't Marussia. It was that boy from last night, my Chilo. He looked from Miss McIntosh to me. He frowned. "You can come in," said Miss McIntosh. "I have cookies." Machilo stepped in, then plopped himself down in one of the spare kitchen chairs. "Is she teaching you English already?" he asked me in Ukrainian. "Ask her in English, Machilo," said Miss McIntosh. Machilo rolled his eyes and reached for a cookie. He popped it into his mouth and hardly chewed it at all before swallowing. He looked at me and said painfully in slow and loud English, "Are you learning to speak English, Nadia?" "Tak." Miss McIntosh gave me a look. "Yes," I said, "I'm learning to speak English." Miss McIntosh nodded with approval. "When you've finished your snack, you two can play in the backyard for a bit if you like." I didn't know whether I wanted to play with my Chilo. What I longed to do was to go back to Miss McIntosh's living room and look at her books. My Chilo gulped down his milk and looked at me. "Let's go," he said in English, pointing to the back door. Miss McIntosh's swing was just like mine, but the wood was darker and more worn. Did she swing on this herself? How funny it would be to see a grown woman on a swing. She was standing at the back door, watching us, so my Chilo said in careful English, "Nadia, sit, and I will push you." Okay, we've got one page left. This is another long chapter. And then chapter 4 is called Am I a Nazi? Okay, so she had some flashbacks there, and she just was remembering some things, and I guess they weren't making sense to her. So now she's outside with my Chilo. Miss McIntosh nodded in approval, then went back inside. I sat down on the swing and pumped my legs to get a little rhythm going. Then my Chilo pushed so hard that it took my breath away. "Be gentle," I said in Ukrainian. "You'll never learn if you keep speaking in Ukrainian," said my Chilo in a voice that mimicked Miss McIntosh. "You're hurting me." Either he didn't understand my English or he didn't care. Each time the swing brought me closer to him, he pushed hard on my back. The swing went so high that I was afraid it would loop around and get tangled in the branch of the tree. With each push, I felt the wind on my face and the freedom flying in the air. "Stop, if that's what you want," said my Chilo, stepping away from the swing. He plopped down on the lawn and combed the grass with his fingers, ignoring me completely. I stretched my feet and dragged them along the ground to slow the swinging down, but it was going so fast that I lost a shoe. I panicked and jumped, landing flat on my face in the lawn. "You are so stupid," said my Chilo. He continued to comb through the blades of grass while I dusted myself off. The back door opened and Miss McIntosh stood there. "Lesson time in 10 minutes, she said. I sat on the grass beside my Chilo. "Are you getting English lessons too?" I said. "Yes," he said. "I come here every afternoon." "But your English is so good already," I said. "My parents like me to come. Then Miss McIntosh is a nice lady, so I don't mind. She makes good cookies." I mulled this over. Did it mean that he would be coming here every day as well? Did it mean that I would be coming here every day as well? If I learned quickly, would I only have to come in the afternoons? I also didn't know how I felt about spending so much time with my Chilo. Where did you live before the war? Said my Chilo. His question took me by surprise. In Solochev. My Chilo rolled his eyes. You're such a bad liar. He was right, I was lying, but what he didn't realize was that I had lived a lie for so long that I couldn't remember where I had really come from. The lying had come so naturally at the camp. If I hadn't done it then, they would have taken me away from Marussia, but something strange had begun to happen since coming to Canada. I was beginning to have flashes from the past, like the ones today, but they were like pieces of a jigsaw that didn't fit. What makes you think I'm lying? I asked. You have a funny accent, he said. My parents were born in Zolochev. Ivan is from Zolochev, but you're definitely from somewhere else. It scared me to think that this boy knew more about my past than I did. Was my father, a friend of your parents? I asked. My father was in the underground with Ivan, said my Chilo. They fought the Nazis together. He said nothing more for a while, but instead concentrated on raking the leaves with his hands. That's what you remind me of. What? I asked. With the hair of yours and those eyes? A Nazi. And then, without a glance at me, he stood up and walked into the house. All right, that is the end of chapter 3. I will see you again for chapter 4. Have a good rest of your day and be good to all your teachers. Bye.